Sansari or?
Yeah, it sounds like I'm sorry, but it's Ann sorry.
Oh.
Get that a lot.
Okay. All right. I will call the meeting to order at 4:33. Are we not doing the flag salute tonight? It's not on the agenda.
Oh, is it not on there? Uh-oh. Lucy, did we just drop it off for a reason, or should we go ahead and do it? We probably should go ahead and do it if it.
Yeah, so for special meetings, I was following we normally don't do that for special meetings.
Okay.
Okay.
I wasn't thinking this is a special one because we didn't have one in July, but you're right. We don't usually meet in July. So I got you.
Okay. All right. Then we'll just move on. And I
Okay.
don't think we have anybody here to address the Personnel Commission, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to business matters. Compensation study presentation by CPS.
All right. I'll go ahead and get it ready for you, Suzanne.
Okay, can you hear me okay? And you can see the slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Mhm.
Well, good afternoon, commissioners and attendees. My name is Suzanne Ansari. I'm a senior HR consultant with CPS HR, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. I served as the project manager for this study and also for the previous classification study that our firm conducted on behalf of TCUSD. So the purpose of today's presentation is to share our final recommendations and findings for the base compensation study. Next slide. Today's agenda will include a brief review of some of the topics that we will cover, a little bit about CPS HR, background and scope of work, and the base salary study findings. Next slide. Before I dive in, I want to briefly just share some information on our firm. CPS HR is a self-supporting public agency established as a joint powers of authority. We are a human resource consulting firm that's worked with public sector and nonprofit clients for more than 37 years. And our headquarters is based out of Sacramento, California. And we've had over 1,200 clients nationwide. And I'm based in Orange County. Next slide. So this project was staffed by several members of our class and comp unit, including project members listed on this slide. Our team members have from 5 to 30 plus years of relevant work experience, and some of our staff are certified compensation professionals. Next slide. So the scope of work for this study, just as a review, included a base salary study, not including benefits. If it did include benefits, we call that a total comp study. There were 32 benchmark classifications, 12 labor market agencies, and we made salary range recommendations for all classifications, not just benchmark classifications. We did an internal pay equity analysis, and our base salary study included the same type of classifications that we looked at for the classification study, including your classified management, unrepresented, and non-certificated classifications. Next slide. So the goal of the base compensation was to ensure equitable pay for Temple City Unified employees based on their job duties and responsibilities. And we know that compensation is a very sensitive topic. We definitely recognize that. It's personal. And because TCUSD is unique because your size and also that you're a merit district. Okay. So most school districts don't have limitless funds, so it makes it critical to make sure the labor markets that we selected were comparable. And I'll talk about that in the next few slides. Next slide. So this slide just shows the base salary study process. Our CPS HR project team completed the following steps in conducting the base salary study. There was an initiation phase where we reviewed all your background materials, including the classification specifications that we helped revise, your salary schedules, pay practices, and org charts. And then we developed the study parameters. We identified the 12 labor market agencies and the 32 benchmark classifications to be surveyed. The next step in the process was developing a data collection method and an online survey. And we followed up with those survey agencies to validate data and to obtain missing data. We made calls, we emailed, we begged and pleaded sometimes to get information that we needed to do those job matches. And what that data that we gathered did is it helps us to know what other agencies are paying for a comparable benchmark class and how this information was used to make the salary range recommendations. So our research included obtaining data from their salary schedules, similar class specifications, the org charts, budgets, position control documents, because we wanted to make sure these classifications that we were matching with were allocated. And so what we did is we provided the internal Temple City Unified project team with a job matching review sheet to get confirmation on our job matches. And then we developed the salary survey summary to really find out how much above or below market were your jobs. And then we did an internal equity analysis, made salary recommendations for all positions. And lastly, we delivered the final report to the district, but also to our advisory committee that kind of walked alongside of us during this process. And then here today to deliver the final report to the Personnel Commission. Next slide. So I want to touch on the methodology that we used in the study. Job matching is really one of the very most difficult parts of the study because we want to make sure we're comparing like classification. And as you know, each school district is different in how they use their positions. So we looked at the preponderance of duties, the scope of authority, and different factors to see if the position was a match to the district benchmark. The major duties and responsibility for both the district benchmark and the comparator position needed to be at least a 70% match in duties and have similar education and experience requirements. Benchmark positions must have had at least 3 matches to be analyzed. In most cases and studies that we find, it's common to have some classifications for which limited market data exists. And that was the case in this study. There was one classification that we didn't have at least 3 matches for. So the labor market agencies, this is a list of the final labor market agencies. And this list was selected collaboratively between CPS-HR and the internal TCSU project team. The selection of the labor market agencies was based on several criteria, including the enrollment, geographic proximity, types of services provided, competing agencies, as in which districts are you losing or gaining employees to. We looked at cost of living, cost of wages, the availability of data, and participation from agencies to complete the survey. We also really wanted to make an effort to include merit districts. So you can see on this slide where there's asterisks that those represent other merit districts. Next slide. So this slide shows the benchmark classifications that were surveyed. And there was a total of 32 benchmark classifications. Next slide. So what's a benchmark classification? Well, simply it just represents an occupational group, family, or profession. So we didn't survey every job position that the district had, but we had several benchmark classifications to recommend a salary range for each class, and that participated in the study. And we looked at the internal relationships within the job family as well. Benchmark classifications are simply jobs with a clear and consistent definition in the relevant labor market, for which reliable market data can be collected. And this slide just represents the criteria that we look for. This next slide is a sample of the individual salary survey data sheet. And I picked the example of the accounting assistant too. So CPS-HR developed an individual data sheet for each of the classifications that were benchmarks and that were used in the study. And we looked at salary grade minimums and maximums. We looked at the salary bandwidth, which really just means the spread between your minimum and your maximum data points. So these data sheets can be found in Appendix A in the final report. So as you can see for this example, CPS-HR found 12 other districts that had a match. And we identified that this position is 0.33% above the labor market. So it was, and at the minimum, and then 4.47% above the labor market at the maximum. So because this job fell between 5% above and below market, we considered this job to be, be at market. So we didn't make a recommendation to change the salary. This slide, oh, I'm sorry, next slide. Sorry, are you on slide 13? I think I messed you up here. Anna, can you hear me? Oh.
Sorry, I hid
Oh.
myself. Is the number at the bottom? This is page.
Yeah, salary survey summary.
Okay, there you go.
And if you could go to the slide above that, that would be great. I forgot to tell you
Okay.
to go forward. So I messed
This
you
is
up on that one.
slide 13.
Sorry.
This is okay.
Yeah, the salary survey summary.
Got it.
So this slide really shows the big picture. I call it the money shot of the salary summary findings and how your district benchmark classifications compared with the labor market. And this example can be found in table 2 on page 8 of the final report. And so before we go through this, I just want to say that if you see a positive number, that's a variance that means that the labor market salaries are higher than your district salaries. And so Temple City would need to increase the salaries by the indicated percentage to reach the labor market. Conversely, a negative variance indicates the percentage that your district is above the labor market. The labor market tends to be a more stable representation of trends in the market since it eliminates high and low payers, which can skew data. So we use the median versus using the average. And so in this slide, you can see in the first column, the benchmark classifications. The second column represents the number of matches that we found. The next 3 columns indicate your district's minimum, midpoint, and maximum salary. The following 3 columns just represent the labor market's minimum, midpoint, and maximum salary. And then we also share the variances for how much above or below the jobs fell based on the labor market. Next slide. So this is a continuation of the summary because I couldn't fit it all in one sheet, but it's a lot of information to take in. So if you wanted a deeper dive, I would refer you to table 2 in the report. So overall, most of Temple City Unified's benchmark classifications are highly competitive based on current salaries as compared to other comparable districts and other merit districts as well within the identified labor market, except for a few management classifications that were found to be under the labor market median. Temple City's current base compensation structure is aligned with recruiting, developing, rewarding, and retaining employees. So that's a good thing, and you should be proud of that. Temple City Unified is below the labor market median or the 50th percentile based on the monthly minimum and maximum salaries for 3 benchmark classifications. And of those, 1 benchmark classification is over 5% below market median. So we did make a recommendation on that, and I'll get into that in the next slide. So some benchmarks were found to be at market, meaning your salaries are similar to what the market is paying. And for benchmark classifications in the survey, like I mentioned before, that fell between 5% above or below market, CPSHR did not recommend any changes to salaries. And most of your benchmarks were either at or above market, meaning that you're very competitive compared to what other districts are paying. Next slide. So CPSHR has provided the salary recommendations for all the benchmark classifications and also the non-benchmark classifications in Appendix B in the report. We also looked at internal equity and factored that into our pay grade recommendations. So in this example, we see the accounting assistant 2 again. We see the current salary range and the min and max. We see the labor market min and max, and then our recommendation as far as where to slot that job. And the last column just represents the rationale that we provided so you know why we made that recommendation to keep it where it was at for the accounting assistant too. Next slide. Temple City Unified School District's compensation structure should be aligned with the following strategic goals. Again, to recruit, develop, retain, and reward employees. And what this study found is that you are paying at or above market for most of your classifications. So again, that is a good thing, and your salaries are very competitive. Now I know there's also, salary is just one slice of the total compensation picture and reward. So you may want to look at your benefits packages to see how those compare with the market later on, now that you have the salary data. Next slide. So I'd like to acknowledge the Temple City internal project team, including Juris Burgos and Hannah Getty, and our advisory committee that represented a really big cross-section of staff from major job families, management, and SEA leadership. And they really walked alongside of our project team during this study. We suggest that the district conduct a review of your overall classification structure and update your classification specifications on a regular basis, at least every 5 years. And the PC, you may already have things in place for looking at class specs and salaries, but every 5 years for the class specs. And then in addition, we recommend a comprehensive salary survey should be conducted at least every 3 to 5 years. So I'd like to thank you for your time today, and I'd be happy to address any questions.
Okay, I have a question. So you studied 32 positions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, out of the 32, I just kind of scanned over. Out of the 32, did you mention how many we are recommending to change or to go above what it was?
Yeah, there's 2 classifications, both are in management.
Okay,
And there was really only 2 that we recommended those salaries increase based on what the labor market told us that they were paying for one of the jobs. The other job was not a benchmark, and it was a management job, but because it fell in the same salary range and there was internal equity and there was similar scope of work and authority, we applied the recommendation to move that class up as well. I believe it was 2 ranges, because on your management salary schedule, I think it goes from a 57 to a 59. There's no 58, but the market told us to pay that job at range 59. So you may want to look into if there's missing salary ranges on your management schedule, and there is. You may want to look at adding those in the future.
great. Thank you. Maria, do you have any questions?
Sorry, I was muted. I don't.
Okay,
I do have a comment. I really appreciate your work on this, and thank you so much. It's wonderful to hear that we are at benchmark for most of our classifications. That's really good to hear that we're competitive, and that we're compensating our staff pretty well. So thank you for that information. Appreciate that.
yes. It was very well documented, and I think we have all the information, and I was hoping that we would eventually get a presentation from you, which we did. So I thank you so much. I thank you, and I thank personnel for doing so. Very well. It's a very good report. Thank you.
Very thorough.
Yes.
And I will just add that our committee, we did share this with our committee. We pulled them together sort of last minute, but everybody was able to be there except 2 members. But we did forward them the information. And I think there was a consensus sort of to understand, if you really look at where we are as a district, we don't tend to lose our classified staff. They tend to stay once we get them in. We're having a harder time actually hiring at the classified level just because of mostly our benefits, I would say.
Mhm.
And so I think something that should be a really good focus for the district, which we are talking about, we are working on, is improving our benefit plans that we can offer, and to looking at the district's contribution, all of those elements. I know one of our classified unions that has a lot of part-time people, and that makes it really difficult. So lots of things for us to look at in the coming year for sure regarding how to better recruit individuals. Retainment isn't seeming to be an issue, but recruitment is definitely difficult.
Right. Great.
Hannah, did you get feedback from those committee members? Positive, negative?
Yeah, I think they were very grateful for the report. It was very thorough. It made sense to them. And I asked them, I said, if you really look at the fact that we don't have a lot of employees leaving, I think employees probably do look every now and then to see what other districts are offering and probably see that the pay is good here, if not better than what's being offered. It's that benefit issue that probably comes into play. And,
Right.
they all agreed, and they're excited that we are looking into other options for benefits. And, all of those things are scary because those are big changes that affect people, and they affect people differently depending on your dependents and depending on, different situations. So those are things that definitely need to be looked at, and they're excited to be part of that as well.
Now, is that committee, are they the people that are in these positions, in some of these positions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we did a really thorough job of trying to pick different people than who we always see. So we definitely had union representation, union leadership representation from both of our 823 and 105 unions. But additionally, we then had Pete Kelly, who is from our maintenance and operations. We had Imelda Salazar, who is from Oak as an office manager. We had a really great person on the committee was Mickey Wong, who was serving as our program supervisor for childcare. And then during the interim of this happening, was appointed to that director job for preschool. So that was really interesting because that job was paid very, very low in comparison, but we didn't have to fix it it wasn't something the salary study had to address since it had changed, it had been reclassed to the appropriate position. So that was a good thing. And then Alexa was also part of our first few meetings. She wasn't at this last meeting, but from a fiscal standpoint, she was able to weigh in that as well.
Great.
That's great.
Good to hear.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all so very much.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. So she didn't mention, and I think that we do need to mention it just in the art of transparency and making sure that everybody understands where we are. The two positions that did come up under market, and as she was saying, I think they're at a level 57. We don't have a 58. If you look at the level 59, it puts them much more in line with the other positions from these other districts. And that was our director of personnel as well as our director of fiscal.
I have it highlighted here.
Yes. So that would be what we're asking you to approve, is just to justify those to the market, to what's represented in the job market.
Correct.
Thank you for clarifying that, Hannah. All right, moving on. We'll move to the compensation studies discussion and approval of our recommendation. So when I was looking at all of the positions and everything, I'm really happy to see that we're pretty much at the benchmark and at market. So that was really good to see. Except for those two positions, the personnel and the tech services.
It was the personnel services and fiscal services.
Right. Okay.
I'm just glad that the studies got done because I know they've been far behind. And so now they're done, and it's great to hear that we don't have to do this for another 5 years. So she recommends every 5 years.
I would recommend that internally we do it every 3 years.
3 years.
I would say, I would say in a couple of years we should get looking at the job descriptions again, especially like I can imagine that based on what we just went through with the pandemic, education is going to greatly change. And so eventually that's going to affect classified positions, classified staffing, what it looks like. Are we going to have more of a virtual world always involved, right? And so what will that look like? So I think the the better recommendation is to internally at least take a look at it maybe in the next 2 years, just really look at our job descriptions, look at how they align market wise. And I will give Juris a lot of credit that she's very good at that. She's very good at researching what other districts are doing. She has great relationships with all the districts around us. So she can get really good insight as to why is this, what's the history behind this. And so it's been very helpful to us when we needed to do that.
Yeah. You know what I was surprised in seeing this was that South Pasadena is pretty low in a lot of their positions. I was quite surprised,
Well, and they did as a district, they're one of the ones also that had to make some cuts during the COVID time. And
Mhm.
it's just really hard right now. Everyone you talk to that works in education, it's so difficult because it never really ended and it just keeps morphing into something and you can't seem to get ahead of it. And that's
Right.
it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's definitely.
We,
Okay.
I'm sorry, recently we also held interviews, for example, for our principal position that's open at La Rosa, and in talking to some of the references for some of the people that we recommended, there are districts out there that are having to close elementary schools because enrollment's down
Really?
everywhere. Yeah.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so that's a hard thing to have to do because then no matter what, you're taking people and reshuffling and having to look at, all those things. So even though there's a lot of talk right now in education that there's money flowing everywhere. It's all one-time money. It's one-time spending. It's a lot of great money to help to help solve some of these issues, but they're temporary fixes. And so districts are really having to look at long-term effects of declining enrollment, of what the pandemic is asking us to have to now follow up with for years to come. So those are questions that I think will always be there, or at least for several years.
Is there knowledge of where those people are going? Are they going to private school, going to
Some
other
are going to private
districts?
I think people are moving out of California at a very higher rate than we realize. We don't feel it when you're on the freeway and you don't feel it when you're shopping somewhere, but I think it is happening. I think families are choosing to raise children in different areas of California and in different states. So I think that's part of it. I think homeschooling has grown. I think private education has grown. Charter schools have, in some areas, have really made a dent on some of the regular public school schools. It's hard to say. It's just a lot of different issues. For specifically in Temple City, we did a little research on it. It has a lot to do with the home value. It's very difficult for someone that's starting a new family to buy a home and live in Temple City. So that we're going to continue, I believe, to see that. And we do have a lot of kids from our surrounding areas come on permit, but so do all the other districts. And so it's just really interesting. And we also lose kids to other surrounding districts. And so.
Right. Yeah, those are good points.
And it's all the surrounding districts, like you say.
Yeah.
Gina, can I get a motion to approve the recommendation, please?
I make a motion to approve the recommendation of the compensation study just performed.
And I will second. So all in favor. So since that's a 2-0 vote, the vote has passed. And we don't need to go into closed session, Hannah, do we?
We can for just a brief moment. Would you like to? Okay.
Sure. Gina, can you make a motion to adjourn to closed session?
I make a motion to adjourn to closed session at 5:01.
And I'll second that. Thank you for the motion.
Thank you. So Andy, can you just send, yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Sorry about that.
No
Okay, and
problem
we
at
are
all.
back,
Thank you.
and there was no action taken in closed session. I thank you, Andy, very much. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you,
very
Andy.
much.
Thank
No.
you,
Wow.
Hannah.
Gina, we will, Gina, can you motion to adjourn,
Yes.
please?
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 5:28 PM.
Great, and I'll second. Thank you so much.
All right.
You all have a good evening. Thank you so much. And
Thank
we'll
you.
see you
Have a
soon.
great night.
You
All
too.
right,
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.